The battle had lasted for 17 hours. The sky above Kepler 442b was filled with smoke and the distant sound of explosions. Commander Zethral of the Varth Dominion knelt in the purple mud with 43 of his surviving soldiers. Their armor was broken. Their weapons were empty. They had nothing left to fight with. Zethral was a veteran of many wars. He had served the Dominion for 60 cycles, leading soldiers into battle against a dozen different species. He knew what happened to prisoners of war. He had seen it himself. He had ordered it himself. Prisoners were tools to be used. They were tortured for information. They were starved to save resources. They were killed when they were no longer useful. Now he was the prisoner. And the humans were coming. He had heard stories about humans. Every species in the galaxy had heard the stories. Humans were new to space travel, but they had spread quickly. They were creative and unpredictable. They fought with a passion that other species found disturbing. They never gave up, even when they should. They were dangerous in ways that made no logical sense. Zethral watched the human soldiers approach through the smoke. They wore heavy combat armor and carried large rifles. Their faces were hidden behind helmets with dark visors. They moved with the careful precision of trained warriors. This is how I die, Zethral thought. On a muddy field, far from home, at the hands of these strange creatures. The first human to reach them was a large male. He stopped a few meters away and looked at the kneeling Varus soldiers. Zethral could not see his face, but he could feel the human studying them. Then the human did something unexpected. He lowered his weapon. "Medic up," the human called over his shoulder. "We have wounded here." Zethral did not understand. His translator device was working correctly. He had heard the words clearly, but they made no sense. Why would the enemy call for a medic? Medics healed people. Prisoners were not healed. Prisoners were left to suffer. More humans arrived. One of them removed her helmet, revealing a young female with brown hair tied back from her face. She carried a large bag with a red symbol on it. She knelt beside Kethvar, the youngest soldier in Zethral's unit, whose thorax was leaking pale blue blood. "Hold still," she said to Kethvar. Her voice was calm and gentle. "I am going to help you." She opened her bag and pulled out strange tools. She cleaned the wound with a soft cloth. She applied a clear substance that stopped the bleeding. She wrapped the wound with white material that stuck to itself. Kethvar was trembling. He looked at Zethral with his compound eyes, silently asking what was happening. Zethral had no answer. He had never seen anything like this. The large human who had lowered his weapon removed his helmet. He was older than Zethral had expected, with lines on his face and gray hair at his temples. His eyes were a pale color that Zethral did not have a name for. "I am Sergeant Kyle Morrison," the human said. "You and your soldiers are now prisoners of the United Earth Coalition. You will be treated according to the laws of war. Do you understand?" "I understand the words," Zethral said slowly. "I do not understand the meaning." Kyle looked at him for a long moment. Then he made a sound that the translator identified as a laugh, but it was not a cruel laugh. It was tired and sad. "Yeah," Kyle said. "I guess you wouldn't. Let us just say that we do things differently." The Varth prisoners were searched for weapons and then loaded onto large vehicles. Zethral expected the vehicles to be prison transports, with hard floors and chains and electric fields to punish movement. Instead, he found rows of cushioned seats with straps to hold passengers safely during travel. A young human soldier helped him climb into the vehicle. The soldier was barely an adult by human standards, with spots on his face and nervous movements. "My name is Pete," the young soldier said. "Do you need anything? Water? Food?" Zethral stared at him. "You are offering me water?" "Well, yeah." It is a long ride to base. We have supplies. I am your prisoner. Pete looked confused. I know. That does not mean you have to be thirsty. He handed Zethral a container of water. It was clean and cool. Zethral drank it slowly, expecting poison, expecting some trick. But there was nothing. It was just water. The vehicle began to move. Zethral tried to sit back in his seat, but a sharp pain shot through his lower body. He hissed involuntarily and shifted his weight. Pete noticed immediately. Hey, are you okay? Are you hurt somewhere? Zethral did not know how to answer. During the battle, a piece of metal had lodged in his lower segment. He had been ignoring the pain for hours. Prisoners did not complain about injuries. Prisoners endured. It is nothing, he said. Pete frowned. He leaned closer and looked at Zethral's lower body. There is something sticking out of you. That is definitely not nothing. It is a minor wound. Minor? There is metal in your body. Pete turned and called to the front of the vehicle. Hey, Sergeant Morrison, this one has shrapnel. He needs medical attention. Tyle's voice came back from the front. Noted for triage when we arrive. Make sure he is stable for transport. Pete looked at Zethral with concern. Does it hurt a lot? Zethral considered lying. He considered staying silent. But something in the young human's face made him tell the truth. It hurts when I sit down, he admitted. Pete nodded seriously. Okay, let me see if I can find something to help. He dug through a supply bag and pulled out a soft cushion. Here, try sitting on this. It might take some pressure off the wound. Zethral took the cushion. He placed it beneath himself and sat down again. The pain was still there, but it was less. Thank you, he said, and the words felt strange in his mouth. He had never thanked an enemy before. He had never had reason to. Pete smiled. It was a young smile, innocent and kind. No problem. We will get you fixed up when we reach base. The doctors there are really good. Zethral looked around the vehicle at his soldiers. The human medic was still working on Kethfor, checking his bandages and speaking to him in soft tones. Other humans were handing out water and food to the prisoners. One human was even showing a wounded Vorith soldier how to use a small device that made light. This is wrong, Zethral thought. This is not how war works. This is not how enemies behave. But as the vehicle carried him toward the human base, sitting on a cushion given to him by a young soldier who cared about his comfort, Zethral began to wonder if everything he knew about war was wrong. The human base was larger than Zethral had expected. It spread across a valley between two mountains, with dozens of buildings made from metal and plastic. Vehicles moved between the structures, carrying soldiers and supplies. Lights glowed in the darkness as the sun set behind the hills. The prisoners were taken to a building near the center of the base. A sign above the door showed the same red symbol that had been on the medic's bag. Zethral's translator told him the building was called a medical center. Inside, the building was clean and bright. The walls were white. The floors were smooth. The air smelled of chemicals that Zethral did not recognize, but they were not unpleasant. Humans in different colored clothing moved quickly between rooms, carrying equipment and speaking to each other in urgent voices. Zethral saw something that made him stop walking. In one room, through a large window, he could see a human soldier lying on a bed. Doctors surrounded the soldier, working on a wound in his chest. The soldier's blood was red, very different from Vorith blood. The doctors were fighting to save his life. In the next room, through another window, he saw something impossible. A Vorith soldier lay on another bed. Human doctors surrounded him too, working just as hard, fighting just as desperately to save him. Keep moving, said a human guard, but his voice was not harsh. You will get your turn. Zethral was taken to a small room with a bed and a chair. A human female entered shortly after. She was middle-aged by human standards, with gray streaks in her dark hair and tired lines around her eyes. She wore the same clothing as the other medical workers. "I am Dr. Lisa Monroe," she said. "I will be examining you today. Can you tell me where you are injured?" Zethral pointed to his lower segment. "There is metal inside me. It hurts when I sit down." Lisa nodded and put on thin gloves. She approached him carefully, moving slowly so he could see what she was doing. "May I touch you to examine the wound?" "You are asking my permission?" "Of course. It is your body. I will not touch you without your agreement." Zethral felt something strange in his chest. It took him a moment to recognize the feeling. It was confusion mixed with something else. Something he had not felt in many cycles. Hope. "You may examine me," he said. Lisa was gentle. She cleaned the area around the wound with soft claws and warm water. She used a small device that hummed and showed pictures on a screen. "I can see the shrapnel," she said. "It is not deep, but it is pressing against the nerve cluster. That is why it hurts so much. I can remove it, but I will need to use medicine to stop the pain during the procedure." "Medicine?" "A substance that will make the area numb. You will not feel anything while I work. Is that acceptable?" Zethral thought about the Dominion's medical practices. When Dominion doctors worked on prisoners, they did not use pain medicine. Pain was part of the process. Pain reminded the prisoner of their position. Pain broke the spirit. "That is acceptable," he said. Lisa prepared a small needle. "This might sting for a moment, but then you will feel nothing." She was right. There was a brief, sharp feeling, and then the pain that had been his constant companion for 2 days simply vanished. Zethral made a sound of surprise. "Good?" Lisa asked. "I feel nothing. That is the idea." She smiled and began to work. The procedure took less than an hour. Zethral watched as Lisa carefully removed a piece of metal from his body. It was smaller than he had expected, barely the size of his smallest claw. Such a tiny thing had caused so much pain. When she finished, Lisa cleaned the wound again and covered it with a small bandage. The bandage had a picture on it, a yellow creature with a round body and a smiling face. "I'm sorry about the bandage," Lisa said. "We ran out of the plain ones." This was all we had left. Zethral looked at the smiling yellow creature. "What is it?" "A character from a children's entertainment program. My daughter loves it." "You have a daughter?" "2 daughters and a son. They are back on Earth with their father." Lisa's voice became soft. "I miss them very much." Zethral did not know what to say. He had not thought of humans as having families. He had not thought of them as having children who watched entertainment programs or parents who missed them. He had thought of them only as enemies. "Thank you," he said finally, "for removing the metal, for the medicine, for the bandage with the yellow creature." Lisa patted his arm gently. "You are welcome. Rest here for a while. Someone will bring you food and water soon." She left the room. Zethral lay on the bed, which was soft and comfortable. He looked at the ceiling, which was plain and white. He thought about everything that had happened since his capture. A short time later, another human entered the room. This one was male, young, with dark skin and a friendly smile. He carried a tray with several containers on it. "I am Corporal Danny Liu," the human said. "I brought you some food. We are not sure what you eat, so we prepared several options. Our nutrition expert says these should be safe for your biology." He placed the tray on a small table beside the bed. Zethral looked at the containers. One held a thick liquid that smelled of protein. Another held solid pieces of something that looked like processed plant material. A third held water. "This is for me?" Zethral asked. "Yes. Please eat as much as you want. If something does not taste good or makes you feel sick, tell us, and we will try something different. Zethral ate slowly. The food was not delicious, but it was nutritious and filling. It was better than anything he had eaten in weeks, since the supply lines to his battalion had been destroyed in the fighting Dodd. As he ate, he heard sounds from outside his room. He heard human voices speaking quickly. He heard the hum of medical equipment. He heard something else too, something that took him a moment to identify: crying. Someone was crying. He finished his meal and stood carefully. His wound did not hurt anymore. He walked to the door of his room and looked out into the hallway. A young human female sat on a bench against the wall. She was wearing the uniform of a soldier, but her face was wet with tears. An older human male sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. "He will be okay," the older human said. "The doctors are the best. They saved my brother last year after the accident on Mars. They will save your friend too." The young female nodded, but did not stop crying. Zethral watched them for a long moment. He thought about all the prisoners he had taken in his long career. He thought about how he had treated them. He had never sat with them when they cried. He had never told them that things would be okay. He had never treated them as anything other than objects to be used and discarded. He returned to his bed and lay down. He looked at the bandage on his wound, at the smiling yellow creature that a doctor's daughter loved. He thought about Lisa Monroe and her 2 daughters and her son, waiting for their mother to come home from a war on a distant planet. He thought about the young human female crying in the hallway, worried about her friend. He thought about Pete, the young soldier who had given him a cushion because his wound hurt. When he sat down, these humans were strange and confusing. They did not behave the way enemies were supposed to behave. They did not follow the rules that Zethral had learned in 60 cycles of warfare. But maybe, he thought as sleep began to take him, maybe their rules were better than his. 3 days had passed since the battle. Zethral's wound was healing well. The human doctors checked on him every morning, changing his bandage and asking if he felt any pain. He always told them the truth now. He had learned that telling the truth led to help, not punishment. On the 3rd day, the Vorith prisoners were moved from the medical center to another building. This building was called a mess hall, and it was where the humans gathered to eat their meals. Zethral walked with his soldiers through the corridors, guards on either side of them but not touching them, not pushing them, not hurting them. The mess hall was a large room filled with tables and chairs. Hundreds of humans sat at these tables, eating and talking and laughing. The sound of their voices was loud and chaotic. The smell of their food was strange but not unpleasant. The prisoners were led to a section of tables that had been set aside for them. Human workers stood behind a long counter, ready to serve food. Zethral approached the counter with caution. "Hello," said the human behind the counter. She was an older female with white hair and a round face. "I am Margaret. What would you like to eat today?" Zethral stared at her. "I am allowed to choose?" "Of course. We have several options that our nutritionist says are safe for your species. Would you like me to explain them?" Margaret pointed to different containers of food and described each one. Some were made from plant proteins. Some were made from synthetic meat compounds. Some were soups and liquids designed for species that did not chew their food. Zethral chose a thick stew that reminded him of meals from his home world. Margaret filled a bowl and handed it to him with a smile. "Enjoy," she said. "If you want more, just come back." He took the bowl and found a seat at one of the prisoner tables. His soldiers joined him, each carrying their own food. They ate in silence for a while, still not quite believing what was happening. Velsha, one of the female soldiers in his unit, was the first to speak. "Commander, I do not understand these humans." "Neither do I," Zethral admitted. "They feed us. They heal our wounds. They speak to us with kindness. What is their purpose? What do they want from us? I do not know. Perhaps they are waiting for something. Perhaps this is a strategy we do not understand. Kethver, the young soldier whose wound had been treated by the human medic during their capture, shook his head. I do not think so, Commander. The humans who treated me did not ask any questions. They did not try to get information from me. They only wanted to help. Zethral thought about this as he ate his stew. It was warm and filling. It was the best meal he had eaten in many weeks. After the meal, something unexpected happened. A group of human soldiers approached the prisoner tables. They were not guards. They were not carrying weapons. They were just ordinary soldiers, still wearing their uniforms but relaxed and casual. One of them was Pete, the young soldier who had given Zethral the cushion on the transport vehicle. Hey, Pete said with a smile. Mind if we sit with you? The Vorath prisoners looked at each other in confusion. Zethral did not know what to say, so he simply gestured at the empty seats. Pete and his companions sat down. They introduced themselves. There was Pete and a female named Amy, and two males named Jack and Carlos. They were all young, probably the same age as Kethver. We wanted to say hello, Amy explained. We thought you might be bored, just sitting here with nothing to do. Bored? Velsha repeated. Yeah, restless, wanting something to occupy your time. Pete pulled out a small device from his pocket. I brought some videos to show you. Want to see what animals look like on Earth? The Vorath soldiers did not respond at first. They did not know how to respond. But Pete did not seem bothered by their silence. He activated the device and held it up so they could see the screen. The video showed a small, furry creature with 4 legs and a long tail. The creature was running across a flat surface, chasing a small red dot of light. Every time the creature got close to the dot moved away. The creature kept chasing, kept failing, kept trying again. That is called a cat, Pete said. They love to chase things. It is very funny. Kethver made a clicking sound that was the Vorath equivalent of a laugh. The other prisoners turned to look at him in surprise. I am sorry, Kethver said quickly. It was not appropriate to laugh. No, it is totally appropriate, Pete said, grinning. That is the point of these videos. They are supposed to make you laugh. He showed them more videos. A large furry creature called a dog was running in circles trying to catch its own tail. A small creature called a hamster was running on a wheel that went nowhere. A bird was imitating the sounds of a human speaking. Soon, more Vorath soldiers were making clicking sounds of amusement. Even Velsha, who was usually very serious, allowed herself a small expression of entertainment. Zethral watched his soldiers laughing with their enemies. He watched Pete and his friends laughing too, happy to share these moments of joy. He thought about all the wars he had fought, all the prisoners he had taken, all the cruelty he had witnessed and participated in. He had never laughed with a prisoner. He had never tried to make a prisoner happy. The idea had never even occurred to him. Why do you do this? Zethral asked Pete. The young human looked at him. Do what? This, all of this. The food, the medical care, the videos, the kindness. Why? Pete thought for a moment. Because it is the right thing to do. But we are your enemies. We killed your soldiers. We would have killed you. I know. But you are not fighting now. You surrendered. The battle is over. Pete shrugged. Once someone stops being a threat, they're just a person. Or, a being. Whatever. The point is, you are not my enemy anymore. You are just someone far from home who probably misses their family. Zethral felt something tight in his chest. I do miss my family. See? That is something we have in common. Pete smiled. I miss my family too. I miss my dog Buster. I miss my mom's cooking. I miss watching stupid videos on the couch with my little sister." He paused. "War is terrible, but it does not have to make us terrible. That is what my dad always says. Your father sounds wise." "He is. He was a soldier too, a long time ago. He taught me that how you treat people when you have power over them says more about you than anything else." Pete put away his device. "Anyway, we should let you rest. But we will come back tomorrow if you want. Maybe I can teach you some card games." The humans stood up and said goodbye. They waved as they left, casual and friendly, as if the Varith prisoners were guests instead of captured enemies. That night, Zethral lay on his bed in the prisoner quarters. The bed was soft. The room was warm. His stomach was full. His wound did not hurt. He thought about Pete's words. How you treat people when you have power over them says more about you than anything else. For 60 cycles, Zethral had treated prisoners with cruelty. He had believed this was strength. He had believed this was how war was conducted. He had believed there was no other way. But now he knew there was another way. The humans had shown him. They had power over him, complete power, and they had chosen kindness. Maybe, Zethral thought, kindness was not weakness. Maybe kindness was the hardest kind of strength. Maybe it took more courage to show mercy than to cause pain. He fell asleep thinking about a cat chasing a red dot of light, forever reaching for something it could never catch. And for the first time since his capture, he felt something like peace. 2 weeks had passed since the battle. The Varith prisoners were moved to a new location, a larger facility that the humans called a detainment center. Zethral expected the new place to be worse than the first. In his experience, permanent facilities were always worse. They had more equipment for causing pain. They had more space for keeping prisoners in misery. But the detainment center was nothing like he expected. Each prisoner was given a private room with a window. The windows looked out onto a courtyard where plants grew and water flowed in a small fountain. The rooms had beds with soft blankets and pillows. They had shelves for storing personal items. They had lights that the prisoners could control themselves, making them brighter or dimmer as they wished. "This is a prison?" Kethver asked in amazement. "It looks like a dwelling for honored guests." Zethral had no answer. He walked through his new room, touching the walls, looking out the window, sitting on the bed. Everything was clean and comfortable. Everything was designed for the well-being of the person living there. The first week at the detainment center brought many surprises. The prisoners were allowed to walk in the courtyard twice each day. They were given books to read, translated into their language. They were offered educational programs about human culture and history. They were encouraged to exercise and maintain their physical health. A human female named Beth Quinn visited the prisoners regularly. She was not a guard or a doctor. She was something called a counselor, which meant her job was to talk to people about their feelings and help them with their mental struggles. "How are you sleeping?" Beth asked Zethral during their first meeting. "I sleep well. Better than I have in many cycles." "Do you have nightmares about the battle?" Zethral hesitated. In Varith culture, admitting to nightmares was a sign of weakness. But he had learned that the humans did not see things the same way. "Sometimes," he admitted, "I dream of the soldiers I lost. I dream of the humans I killed. I wake up feeling heavy and sad." Beth nodded with understanding. "That is very normal. What you experienced was traumatic. It would be strange if you did not have nightmares." She leaned forward. "Would you like to talk about what happened? Sometimes sharing our burdens makes them lighter." Zethral talked. He told Beth about the battle, about the decisions he made, about the soldiers who died following his orders. He told her about his fear when the humans captured him. He told her about his confusion at their kindness. Beth listened without judging. She asked gentle questions. She helped him understand his own feelings. "Guilt is a heavy thing to carry," she said at the end of their session. "But guilt also means you have a conscience. It means you care about the harm you caused. That is not a weakness, Zethral. That is what makes you a good person." A good person. No one had ever called Zethral a good person before. He was a commander, a warrior, a servant of the Dominion. Being good had never been part of his job description. New prisoners arrived at the facility as the weeks passed. One of them was a female pilot named Zethanol. Her escape pod had been damaged during the battle, and she had drifted in space for 3 days before human search and rescue teams found her. When Zethanol arrived, she was weak and frightened. She had been expecting torture. She had been expecting death. "It hurts when I sit down," she reported to the guards. She had been injured during her ejection from her fighter craft. Zethril approached her before the guards could respond. "Report to the medical building. The human doctors will help you." Zethanol stared at him like he had gone insane. "The humans will help me?" "Yes, they helped me when I was injured. They will help you too." Zethanol went to the medical building, still looking confused and scared. She returned hours later with her injury treated, her wound bandaged, and a look of complete bewilderment on her face. "They gave me medicine for the pain," she said to Zethril. "They gave me food and water. They asked if I was comfortable. I do not understand. Neither did I, at first. But you will understand eventually." One afternoon, Sergeant Kyle Morrison visited the detainment center. Zethril was surprised to see him. The human sergeant had been wounded during the battle too. A Vorath plasma bolt had burned his shoulder. Zethril remembered ordering that shot. "How is your wound?" Zethril asked carefully. Kyle showed him the scar. The skin was pink and smooth, still healing. "It is getting better. The doctors say I will have full mobility in a few more weeks." "I am sorry. My soldiers shot you because of my orders. And I ordered my soldiers to shoot your people." Kyle shrugged. "That is war. We were enemies then. We were both doing our jobs. You do not hate me for what I did?" Kyle sat down on a bench in the courtyard. He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the fountain where water sparkled in the sunlight. "My grandfather was a soldier," Kyle finally said. "He fought in a war on Earth, a very bad war, many years before I was born. He was captured by the enemy and held prisoner for 3 years." Zethril sat down beside him. "What happened to him?" "The soldiers who held him were cruel. They starved him. They beat him. They did things I cannot even describe." Kyle's voice became heavy with old pain. "He survived. He came home. But he was never the same. He could not sleep without screaming. He could not hear loud noises without hiding. The war ended, but for him, the war never really ended. I am sorry for your grandfather." Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was old and worn, with faded writing on it. "Before my grandfather died, he gave me this letter. He made me promise to read it and remember it. He said it was the most important thing he ever learned." Kyle unfolded the paper carefully. He read the words aloud. "To whoever reads this, remember that every enemy has a family who loves them. Every enemy was once a child who laughed and played. Every enemy has hopes and dreams and fears. When you have power over another being, you have a choice. You can add to the pain in the universe, or you can reduce it. I have seen what pain does to people. I have felt it in my own body and my own mind. I beg you, choose to reduce it. Choose kindness over cruelty. Choose mercy over revenge. This is how we make the universe better, one choice at a time." Kyle folded the letter and put it back in his pocket. "My grandfather wrote this when he was dying. He wanted me to remember that enemies are still people. He wanted me to remember that cruelty destroys the person who is cruel as much as the person who suffers. Zethral felt a strange sensation in his eyes. They were becoming wet. He had not known Vorath could cry, but apparently they could. Your grandfather was very wise. He was. He was also broken by what was done to him. I do not want to break anyone else. That is why I treat prisoners with kindness. That is why I ordered my soldiers to help your wounded instead of leaving them to die. That is why I visit you here, to make sure you are being treated fairly. Kyle stood up. I do not know if this war will end soon, or if it will go on for many more years. I do not know if you and I will ever meet again after you go home. But I want you to know something. What? You are not my enemy anymore, Zethral. You are just someone far from home, trying to survive, hoping to see your family again. Just like me. Just like everyone here. Kyle extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Maybe someday our peoples will be friends instead of enemies. Maybe it starts with moments like this. Zethral reached out and grasped Kyle's hand. The gesture felt strange, but it also felt right. Maybe it does, he said. Maybe it starts with us. The war ended on a quiet day in the 7th month of Zethral's captivity. There was no great battle, no dramatic final confrontation. There were only negotiations and treaties, and tired leaders on both sides agreeing that enough blood had been spilled. The news spread through the detainment, sent her like fire through dry grass. Prisoners gathered in the courtyard, talking in excited voices, hardly daring to believe what they were hearing. After months of uncertainty, they were going home. Zethral stood apart from the celebration. He watched his soldiers embrace each other, clicking and hissing with joy, and he felt something complicated in his heart. He was happy, of course. He wanted to see his family again. He wanted to sleep in his own bed and eat food from his own world and breathe air that smelled like home. But he also felt sadness. In 7 months, this place had become familiar. The humans had become familiar. In a strange way, leaving felt like loss. The day before the prisoner exchange, Captain Greg Palmer summoned Zethral to his office. Palmer was the commander of the detainment center, a middle-aged human with gray hair and kind eyes. He had visited the prisoners many times during their captivity, always making sure they were treated well, always listening to their concerns. Commander Zethral, Palmer said, standing up from his desk. Thank you for coming. You summoned me. I had no choice. Palmer smiled. You always have a choice here. But I appreciate you coming anyway. He gestured to a chair. Please sit. There is something I want to discuss before you leave. Zethral sat. His wound had healed completely months ago, but he still remembered the pain. He still remembered how the humans had taken that pain away. I know how this works, Palmer said. You go home. You report to your superiors. You tell them about your captivity. And then your leadership decides what story to tell the rest of your people. That is correct. I cannot control what story they choose to tell. Maybe they will say we treated you badly. Maybe they will say we tortured you for information. Maybe they will use lies to make their people hate us even more. Palmer shrugged. I have no power over that. Then why are you telling me this? Palmer opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a small data chip. He placed it on the desk between them. That chip contains complete records of every Vorath prisoner held at this facility. Medical records showing every treatment we provided. Food records showing every meal we served. Housing records showing where you slept and what you were given. Video recordings of the courtyard, the mess hall, the counseling sessions. Zethral picked up the chip. It was small, barely larger than his smallest claw, but it felt heavy in his hand. Everything is there, Palmer continued. Proof that we treated you according to our laws of war. Proof that we tried to show you kindness and dignity, even though we were enemies. Why give this to me? Because I believe in truth. Because I believe that someday, somehow, this truth might matter. Palmer leaned back in his chair. Maybe your leaders will destroy the chip and tell lies anyway. Maybe they will use it to prove that humans are weak and foolish for showing mercy. Or maybe, just maybe, someone will see it and think differently. Maybe someone will wonder if there is a better way to treat prisoners. Maybe someone will decide to show mercy to a human soldier someday because of what is on that chip. Zethral turned the chip over in his hands. You are taking a great risk. If my leaders study this data, they might learn things about human psychology and strategy. They might. But I think the potential for good outweighs the risk. Palmer stood and walked to the window. I have been a soldier for 30 years. I have seen a lot of war. I have seen what cruelty does to both sides. It creates cycles of revenge that never end. Each act of cruelty justifies the next one. Enemies teach each other to hate more and more. He turned back to face Zethral. The only way to break the cycle is to choose differently. To show mercy, even when mercy was not shown to you. To treat enemies with dignity, even when they do not deserve it. It is not easy. It is not natural. But it is the only way to build a universe where our children do not have to fight the same wars we fought. Zethral put the chip in a secure pouch at his belt. I will protect this data. I will make sure it reaches the right people. That is all I ask. The next morning, the transport ship arrived. 46 Vorath prisoners gathered in the courtyard for the last time. They were healthier now than when they had been captured. Their wounds had healed. Their bodies were strong. Their spirits were changed in ways that were harder to see. Many of the human soldiers who had been their guards came to say goodbye. Zethral saw young Pete standing near the gate, holding something in his hands. Velsha walked up to Pete. During the months of captivity, they had become something like friends. Pete had taught her card games. She had taught him Vorath meditation techniques. They had watched hundreds of animal videos together. I will miss you, Velsha said. I will miss you too. Pete held out the object in his hands. It was a small stuffed animal, a replica of the dog from the videos. For you, Pete said. To remember Buster? Velsha took the toy carefully. She held it against her thorax the way a Vorath mother might hold her child. I will treasure it always. Zethral approached Sergeant Kyle Morrison, who stood near the transport ship with his arms crossed. The scar on his shoulder was barely visible now. Just a faint pink line on his skin. Sergeant Morrison. Commander Zethral. They stood in silence for a moment. Two warriors who had tried to kill each other, now standing together in peace. I have thought much about your grandfather's letter, Zethral said. I have thought about the choice he asked you to make. The choice between adding pain and reducing it. And what did you decide? I decided that I've been adding pain for too many years. I decided that I want to reduce it instead. Zethral touched the pouch where the data chip rested. I will tell my people the truth about what happened here. I will tell them about the kindness you showed us. I will tell them that humans are not the monsters they have been taught to fear. Kyle nodded slowly. That is a brave choice. Your leaders might not thank you for it. Perhaps not. But it is the right choice. Your grandfather knew that. You know that. And now I know it too. Kyle extended his hand. Zethral grasped it, no longer feeling strange about the gesture. Good luck, Commander. Stay safe. Take care of your family. You as well, Sergeant. I hope we never meet on a battlefield again. So do I. But if we do, I hope we can find a way to end it without more killing. Zethral released his hand and walked toward the transport ship. He paused at the ramp and looked back one more time. The humans were waving, all of them, guards and doctors and counselors and soldiers. They were waving goodbyes to their former enemies, as if they were saying farewell to friends. He waved back. Then he boarded the ship. The journey home was long and quiet. The prisoners sat in their comfortable seats, looking out the windows at the stars passing by. Some of them slept. Some of them talked softly. Some of them simply sat and thought of everything that had changed. Zethral thought about the data chip in his pouch. He thought about Captain Palmer's words. He thought about Kyle Morrison's grandfather and the letter that had changed everything. He did not know if he could change his people. The Dominion had believed in cruelty for thousands of years. They had built their empire on fear and pain. Changing that would take more than one soldier and one data chip, but he had to try. He had to plant the seed, even if he never saw the tree grow. When the ship finally landed on War soil, when Zethral stepped out onto the ground of his homeworld, he stood tall and straight. His wound had healed completely. He felt no pain when he moved, no pain when he sat down, but he carried something else now. Something the humans had given him that was more valuable than any medicine or bandage. He carried hope. And he was determined to share it with everyone who would listen.